Good morning, or I guess good afternoon, depending where you're joining from. My name's Liam Julian. I'm the Chief of Programs and Public Policy at the Sandra O'Connor Institute, and this is the Public Square. And some of you have joined the Public Square before, I think. I've seen some familiar names and faces. Some of you have not. So, what is the Public Square? Well, it's basically it's an online public square. It's an opportunity for us to create a community, a place of civil dialogue where we can talk about issues, and we can talk about them in a way that is sort of productive and nonpartisan and civil. And so you can see here the O'Connor Institute, our core values: civil, collaborative, fact-based, inclusive, nonpartisan, objective. And so those are all kind of things that we like to keep in mind while we have this discussion. We certainly want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to express themselves, but we like to do it in a way that's civil and we try to keep it sort of a little bit above the fray and sort of a nonpartisan kind of way, talking about the issues and things like that. Justice O'Connor herself always used to say that it really was possible and indeed preferable to disagree without being disagreeable. So go to the next slide. Oh, that's me again, Chief of Programs and Public Policy. We don't need to see that. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about our community app before we started. And I think a lot of you probably joined us on the Public Square through the app, but we have an app, and it's just been fascinating and so gratifying to see the growth in this thing over just the past few months. And really, it truly is a community app. There's lots of rich content on there for sure. But what makes it so vibrant is you all, the engagement with the different civics questions and topics and ideas. We have a book club, just all kinds of good stuff there. So if you haven't already signed up, I'd really encourage you to check it out, because it is growing. It is a vibrant space, and again, it sort of reflects what we talked about, which is the ability to sort of have a community where we talk about civics and ideas, but we talk about them in a really sort of civil and productive way. So it's really fascinating to see it grow. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about what the civics issues that we think are going to most shape the coming year. We're only in February, and so we conducted some polls on the app, and this is what you all said. So you can see here. It was civil discourse that kind of took the top spot, which was pretty interesting. And a lot of the national polling, when you look at sort of issues, the economy is just consistently at the top, right? But in our poll, civil discourse was came out on top. And I should also say that in also national polling, we're seeing an uptick in people who are concerned about civil discourse specifically, and sort of how we disagree as a country. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, this was another question that you all kind of responded to on the app. Which civic value matters most today? You can see the choices there. Responsibility came out on top on that one. I mean, they're all good, of course, but it was interesting to see responsibility in the top spot. And we'll go to the next one. This was really fascinating, and I think is actually a testament to the type of community that we have on the app. Do you feel your vote has real influence? And top spot went to always, which made me feel really great. And you can see there that rarely was really kind of the last, the lowest. Sort of choice as far as respondents, which is interesting because if you look at the national data, especially among young people, there's a lot right now of sort of concern about whether your vote actually does have influence. But in our community, you all said you were very confident that your vote still does have a lot of real influence. Okay, is that the last one? Or do we have another one? Nope, we got one more. Do you have a local election coming up, and how confident are you in understanding your local ballot? And again, our community is very confident or somewhat confident. And this is a little bit different than some of the national data on this, where sort of when you actually ask polling questions of people about their local elections, or even things like the three branches of government, you tend to get responses that indicate that that familiarity is and understanding is not actually there. So just wanted to share those data with you, and now sort of like open it up, because this is what the public square is about. It's for us to talk about the issues, and our topic today, right, is the civics issues that are going to be really shaping 2026. And so I'm super interested in what you all think about that and why. So the one thing that we can do, and it'll be easy, is down here in the React. Um, there should be an option for you to raise your hand. So you can raise your electronic hand, and that way you'll pop up and we'll be able to spotlight you if you have something that you'd like to say. Does everybody see that? So if you want to share, that's a great way to do it, because we'll be able to see you, and then we can I can call on you and we can talk about it. So who wants to jump in first on the issue, the civics issue that's going to most shape 2026? Do you all agree that it's civil discourse? Does anybody have a different idea? Anyone? There was a lot of options there to choose from. Does anybody think? I mean, I was surprised economy did not come in top on that one. Actually, that people are more concerned right now about civil discourse. There were some other possibilities too. Civic engagement is always a concern as well, and we see that in a lot of the national data, that people are concerned about their ability to engage in a productive way, and also sort of the environment for engagement today. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? What do we think? What do we think is all right? Let's see. We're going to go to the chat. Sometimes, here's what happens sometimes: people are a little shy at the beginning. And so people like to put things in the chat instead, which is fine. Okay, we've got a question in the chat. Are voters more motivated or apathetic in this current environment? And do you think it's going to impact turnout this fall? That's a really good question, because when we have an environment like we're in right now, where things are somewhat, polarized, maybe somewhat is not accurate. They are definitely polarized. That can, as Elizabeth says in the chat, kind of redound to in one of two ways: that you can get more apathy, or you can get more motivated. So that's a really good question. What do you guys think? More motivated or more apathetic? Anyone? You can also raise your physical hand too, if you would like to do that. And we can find you and we can spotlight you. Motivated, says Lissa. Okay. Thanks, Lissa. You want to share any more about that? Why are you more motivated, Lissa, and not and instead of apathetic? Okay, we've got somebody. Graham, go ahead. You're on mute, Graham. There you
Okay,
go.
unmuted.
All right. Hello.
Yeah, I would agree that people are going to be more motivated, particularly those who might identify as um, not the part with aligned with the party in power right now.
Hmm.
So I think um, I think it's going to drive turnout quite a bit this fall.
Interesting. Okay, so you think we're going to see more turnout this fall?
Yes.
Graham says. Okay. All right. Georgia, go ahead.
I think with younger voters, we'll definitely have more voter turnout because
Okay.
a lot of the kids are more informed and are going, are more engaged in civil discourse than we've had in the past.
Okay. Interesting. So tell me a little bit more about that. You think that younger people are more informed than in the past. How so? How is that happening?
I think through a lot of schools are teaching more and more uh, civic courses than
Mm.
more history courses now more than ever before. So kids are understanding the government more and are more willing to have opinions on the government and their decisions. And with a huge amount of high schools having walkouts about these issues, so I think that is showing us that our younger generation is more engaged in civil discourse than we've had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Are you in school right now?
Yes, I'm in my
Yes.
school
Okay.
library.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so you're engaging with civics at school. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, we have seen a lot of states passing new sort of legislation requiring more civics courses. That's been sort of something that we've seen happening. We also recently did a some research, a public policy brief that we put out that showed that even though that's happening, teachers are not necessarily getting the preparation they need to meet that demand. So I don't know, Georgia, if you feel that, but what we found when we talked to teachers was that they say that they don't get the preparation in civics, and then they also don't get the support that they feel they would need in order to teach civics really well in the current environment where, one misstep or something could really land you in hot water potentially, and they're worried about that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Um, for in my school, we had seventh graders learn civics. And my teacher, I feel, is very prepared. She actually one of the people who designed the Wisconsin civic coursework. So
Okay.
she's very prepared, more than an average teacher. But I feel like this teachers being not as it's very hard for teachers to be able to talk about civics and the current political environments because they don't want to go be too partisan
Right.
for fear of losing their jobs, to be honest. So I think teachers have to walk a very fine line. And at least for me, I've seen a lot of my teachers will use outside sources such as we do CNN 10, which do talk about partisan issues, but then the teachers aren't directly having an opinion on it.
Right.
So it kind of makes it so that they're detaching their partisan issues. But I do see that even in other classes, we have teachers have to walk a very fine line
Mm.
with any issues just in small great conversations that drift towards the partisan issue. They have to be very careful about how they redirect it.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are all really good points, Georgia. Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's good. It's good that you have a teacher who is so sort of, well prepared. You're very lucky. That's fantastic. Okay, Susan, go ahead.
In Connecticut, where I'm from, the
Mm.
Secretary of State actually started to do civic education using social media and becoming the spearheader of basic information. And what I came to understand through that process was that the primary vehicle for civic education over the last few decades has been actually the parties
Mm.
during the election season, which I hadn't realized really had happened. But so she actually goes out to nonprofits and encourages them to carefully, because we have to be sure we're not nonpartisan, get involved in basic education, dates, times, roles, responsibilities, that kind of thing. So I didn't know if that was happening anywhere else. Maine was doing it and Connecticut, but I don't know if it's happening anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I'd be interested to hear if anybody else had thoughts on that. But yeah, that's interesting. The political parties themselves, I mean, obviously they have, an interest in getting people educated enough to be out there sort of voting and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Martha. You're on mute, Martha.
Sorry, I got it. Thank you so much for having this great conversation. I do want to say that from the world that I travel in, which is education in Florida, yes, legislature has added some civic courses. However, they've been added with limitations.
Mm.
Teachers have to follow a certain protocol, and that's about it. It has to do with whatever is discussed in the classroom to the ability to recommend books, some of which are banned. And so even though they're good books, they cannot be recommended. So teachers are somehow limited in how much they can teach and how much they would like to have these courses added to their curricula. So I think that because of that, and again, in this world that I'm traveling, I believe that everybody's going to be very motivated to go and vote and to encourage people to vote. and to see that perhaps things can be a little bit easier for teachers. And if that's the case, then it'll be much better for our students.
Mm, yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, that's true. And of course, the civics courses do tend to sometimes become sort of battleground
Mm.
for political points of view, and that can make it even trickier, as you point out, Martha, to teach them in the classroom. Another question from Elizabeth in the chat is asking about elected leaders today. Our elected leaders, Elizabeth says they just seem less civil and. So does that, from Elizabeth's wondering, is that motivate voters to reelect them or to remove them from office? It's interesting. That's an interesting question. Sort of what is the incentive for these political leaders to act less civilly? That's a very good question. Does anybody have thoughts on that? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've wondered about that myself because one thing we do know about, political figures is that they tend to sort of do things that will help them get elected. And so you have to wonder, of course, if they are doing this, do they believe that it will help them get elected? Go ahead, Lissa.
Yes, I would like to say that I think at this point, a lot of folks are feeling the pressure of not necessarily a political side, but the fact that they feel like our democracy is at risk.
Mm.
And so I think more people are motivated. And I know personally, there's been several that have contacted me to ask questions, not necessarily my opinion, but ask questions. And I've been able to direct them to some factual information.
That's great, Lissa. That's really helpful. Yeah. Certainly concerns about the functioning of government are showing up in polls today and sort of whether sort of our institutions are still functioning in the way that we want them to be functioning. And I think a lot of people, do have concerns about that for sure. That's reflected. But good on you for passing along facts. I think facts really can help a lot to keep everybody sort of on the same page so that we can actually have discussions that are meaningful because we're using the same facts. That's certainly something that we're probably going to see in the upcoming. I mean, we're talking about 2026, right? And the civics issues that will affect 2026. Well, we do have elections, right? And I wonder what you guys think. I mean, this might be the first election where artificial intelligence is actually a big deal. Does anybody have thoughts about that? Because I've been thinking about that a lot. Go ahead, Georgia.
Um, I think that the AI is such a big part of this election, and it was also part of um, in the last presidential election, we had the deep fake videos of different celebrities endorsing uh, the representatives and the people running for office. And I think that was kind of our first view into how AI is really going to affect these elections. And it's affecting not just elections, but all different parts of um, our world right now is AI. But the really the deep fakes, I think that's going to be our biggest uh, part where it's going to be really confusing for everyone to understand: is this real? Is this fake? What's going on?
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because yeah, we did have that happen in past elections, but man, it sure seems like every week these capabilities get more and more sort of well, it just gets harder and harder to say what's real and what's not real. And so I really wonder that, when elections season really kicks off and the campaigning kicks off, I wonder if you guys have thoughts about that, about the right way to ensure that facts are conveyed, whether there needs to be some type of regulatory system in play for AI. I just be curious about your thoughts there. Yeah, go ahead, Lana.
Um, AI has a huge potential of doing especially fact checking, which is going to be very interesting in the upcoming election because it is not supposed to be partisan in any way. It's just supposed to literally run down and give you the information as it has been programmed. And I'm real curious to see how that's going to affect the upcoming election. I mean,
Yeah.
it's already affected the speech from last night. I mean, it was amazing the different rundown that they
Can a
did
robot write a
today. I'm
symphony?
sure AI actually
Can a
influenced.
robot turn a canvas into a beautiful masterpiece?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. Oh, can we mute if we're not? Thanks, Lana. And that's a really, really interesting point that AI could also be used not just in sort of ways that would undercut facts, but it's possible that AI could be used in ways that would sort of help us to identify the facts in the upcoming cycle. So that's a really good point. Interesting in the comments. Thank you, Brent. Nice words about Justice O'Connor. And Brent says that he thinks politics are less civil because of what he calls the angertainment industry. And so I think we probably know what he means by that, but where you actually, generate clicks or views, you make money essentially by sort of playing to people's emotions. So that's a really good point, Brent. Yeah. So I don't know, oh, sorry, the chat is going here. AI can make up information out of thin air. Yeah, this is true too, right? So that's the other sort of idea is that though AI has potential to sort of help us identify the facts, I think if any of us have used AI, we probably have also seen that AI likes to make up its own facts sometimes when it doesn't actually know the answer. And so they're still sort of working that out. But yeah, good point, Sarah. Good point in the chat. Are there? I was wondering about this when I was sort of preparing for this conversation. Are there any areas in which, because we're reading a lot, about sort of people feeling a little bit alienated at the moment, and we're talking right about whether the polarization is going to lead to people being more likely to turn out or more apathetic. But I was sort of curious if there were any sort of issues that where you all think there's sort of like a positive momentum to in 2026, because we read a lot about the areas in which people are concerned. But I mean, are there civics areas where we are sort of seeing some positive momentum? I tend to think that in civics education, for example, as Georgia pointed out, that's one that actually people are starting to become much more interested in civics issues, and more engaged. And in part, as I said, we've seen with our new Civics for Life, the community app, the amount of engagement on that has been really fantastic to see. So I don't know if you all have seen any of that as well. Yeah, go ahead, Lana.
I think people are truly worried for the first time in a long time about our experiment, the American experiment. And I'm not, I don't care which side you're on. I think both sides can see that the degradation of the civil discourse is tearing the country apart. And I don't know how our experiment goes on if we can't have basic discussions about what we think is right and wrong, especially in law.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good points, Lana. And we did a conversation a while back with some filmmakers who had made a documentary about the work of an academic named Robert Putnam. Some of you may be familiar with Robert Putnam, but Robert Putnam was writing a long time ago, back in the 90s, really, is when he started doing his work, warning about what we were seeing as a slide in membership of Americans in voluntary associations. I'm talking like clubs, PTA, teachers, all that kind of stuff, where churches, church groups, all of those things, dinner parties, that's all been on the down slope. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because of what Lana was talking about how our civil discourse has kind of degraded, and maybe we've gotten into our corners. Those clubs and associations tended to bring together lots of people who thought very different things. And so being part of those clubs and organizations kind of help people to actually hone those civil discourse skills. But those have been going away. And so I wonder sort of what's the replacement to that? I mean, Elizabeth asked in the chat, is it civics education? Is that where we're going to kind of regain the sort of civil discourse? I mean, there certainly seems to be an appetite for it. Yeah, Carlos, go ahead. I know what Carlos is going to say.
Hey, I felt like you were just talking about me here.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, one of the ways that I found out how to get more civically engaged was the O'Connor Institute. They had this program for emerging leaders, and I got invited to a Jeffersonian dinner, and there was other people like myself that wanted to have these discussions. I thought I was just a policy nerd or something like that, or a history nerd. And so we formed an organization, Arizona Talks, that does this in the community level. So we're hosting conversations about education, immigration, and bringing different perspectives. And what we found is that people are hungry for third spaces. You know, sometimes we just go from home to work, and that's the two spaces that we're in. We used to have places of worship and clubs like what you're talking about with Putnam, where people used to bowl together. Well, we wanted to form an organization, a third space where people can come and talk about these issues, just like we're doing here today. So
Yeah.
I think this is only going to get more popular, and the demand for this is very high, given that this is the 250th year. Everybody's asking themselves, how do we live up to the values that started this country? So I think it's only going to get more popular, and thanks to you, Liam, and the O'Connor Institute for being one of those third spaces for us to come and be together.
Well, thanks, Carlos,
Excuse
and good
me,
on you, and
Julian.
thanks to you too
Excuse
for. Oh, go ahead, Martha. Yeah,
no,
please.
excuse me. I'm gonna have to leave you. Oh, I'm about to cry, but I have to leave you because I have an international call coming in. I am
Okay.
so sorry, but this is wonderful, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank
Okay.
you.
No, thanks, Martha. Yeah, no, thank you very much. And no, Carlos, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's really fantastic, very important. And yeah, as Carlos is talking about, the third space is it used to be like a three-legged stool, as Carlos is saying, for everybody, right? You had home life, you had work life, and then you had this sort of clubs, associations, your church, your community life. And it is that third leg of the stool that we've seen so in such decline. But yes. I think we are seeing an appetite for it. Georgia might have something to say about this, but especially among younger people, there seems to be this kind of desire to, kind of get out there and start to join more organizations, talk to people like we're doing now from all over, and hear the different points of view and opinions. So yeah, thanks, Carlos, for bringing that up. Yeah. Um, so it's interesting because we're talking about civil discourse. And of course, in politics, we disagreement is endemic to what we do in this country. I mean, disagreement is who we are. We're a huge, diverse country, and disagreement is how we get things done. Compromise is how we get things done. But I'm kind of curious, in our environment today, like, do you guys have any ideas about what would a better disagreement look like? I mean, how would that happen? I always wonder, if our politicians were sort of asking us, what kind of disagreement that we would like them to be doing more of, and versus less of the sort of angry kind. What would that look like in practice? I always wonder. Does it look like going back to a previous time, or is it something completely different? I'm always curious about that. Brent, you came off mute. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like in that respect, we need to go back to the previous time. If you just look at old footage of the way things were done, even just 30, 40 years ago, there was more civility and like the famous a lot of stories about, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, you know, socially getting together and just talking through issues and so forth. If we could just, uh, s- I think it would look like supporting the person from the opposite party, but disagreeing with the issues. Just keep it to the issues when you're disagreeing, but show that you care and support the opposing party. If we could just do more of that and have more folks lead by example that way, that would sure be nice. And like you were saying too, with all of the um, volunteering and different organizations, if we could get that more active again, boy, that would be great, because you're right, then you're naturally exposed to other viewpoints, and you see how there are good people with all different viewpoints, and we don't have to get so worked up about disagreements. We can be agreeable when we disagree.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Brent. Yeah, we often think about, Justice O'Connor, and being confirmed, 99 to 0, right, was her
Right,
confirmation. So, that doesn't happen as much anymore, right? So there was
right.
a time when we were able to do this a little bit better, I think. Interesting what you're talking about with clubs, and yes, it's interesting in those associations, you do come into contact with people who are very different. And there's also an added aspect, which is that those associations have to be governed by the people in them, right? And so by being a part of those associations, you learn how an organization is run, and you get to be a part of it, right? And you have to sort of organize the meetings, and maybe you have to sort of make, stand and move for something to be decided, et cetera, et cetera. So you almost get sort of a hands-on practice in that, and that we're losing that a little bit. But very interesting. Thanks,
Yeah,
Brent. Yeah.
yes. Good,
You have anything
good
else?
points. No, thank you. Thank you so much for all you're doing, and it's great to listen in, and yeah, anything I could do to help the country in this way with the civics would be fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot. Okay. Oh, Natasha, I see you got a hand up.
Yeah, so a couple different things come to mind. One, I used to teach in classrooms within the last decade, and we would do this healthy relationships building blocks. And it was interesting in the span of about 5 years, what used to be a base block for building healthy relationships, trust, um, got moved further away as a base block of getting along with anyone and everyone, and instead got replaced with compromise. And so I asked the students what was happening, why that was, and they talked about how the differing worldviews had just become more farther apart. And so to do even basic projects in the classroom, they had to use more compromising skills versus attributing just general trust from the very beginning. So that I thought was interesting. A couple other thoughts is we talk about school and having these civics conversations in school, but I mean, I'm all about parenting and parents' rights, and I get a little nervous of whether or not the educators in the school can actually are comfortable with conflict and being able to offer both sides. And I would love those conversations in our house happens around the dinner table, and so that's how we can learn, I think, primarily. And I think family, we're lacking some of those family structures to have those conversations around the dinner table first and foremost. And then one final thought as to what encourages me is knowing history. Knowing our American history, I think, does encourage me. Does give me a more positive outlook, and it does remind me that the civil discourse we're seeing today, there was some, like I had thrown in the chat with, tongue in cheek a little bit about duels, but they were pretty intense back in the day as well when they were discussing issues.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Natasha. It's always good to keep that perspective. Yeah, if you read about American history, sometimes, you come to the conclusion, okay, it's not actually that bad right now. We did actually have a civil war in this country. I mean, so but yes, it's good to keep that perspective. Really interesting stuff about trust that you said there. I find that fascinating too. One way that we found that teachers feel comfortable in the classroom, to kind of answer a little bit of your question on that, that they're going to be able to present the issues, the civics issues, in a way that really does reflect both sides, or is sort of, nonpartisan, et cetera, is by grounding their lessons in primary sources. We heard this over and over and over again from really experienced teachers, that that's how they navigate these sort of tricky minefields in the classroom. Is it's not that necessarily they're teaching what happened in the news yesterday. They're teaching the Constitution. And they're having the students read the primary documents, and then having students read opposing views from that time on the stuff that we're still having discussions and debates about today. And that accomplishes a few things. Number one, it just sort of takes the temperature down, right? Because it's, very, documents from hundreds of years ago. But I think it also helps students understand that we have been having these disagreements for a long time, and that is part of sort of what we're doing here, and that disagreeing is part of how we actually come to sort of productive solutions. So, but thanks, Natasha. Thanks so much for that. Looking again in the chat here, there's just always good stuff going on there. Um, does it seem that elected officials are pushed into corners or extremes because of the threat that they will be primaried? If they work across the aisle. If so, how to fix? That's a really good question. Have the incentives changed? I mean, any of us who, if we're familiar with, I was going to say economics, but just like life, realize that you have to look at where the incentives are to understand the behavior sometimes. And so, what are the incentives now? I mean, are the incentives for politicians, as Elizabeth said, are they different? Are they actually incentivized to not work, to not compromise with people with whom they disagree, because doing so will actually land them in hot water in a primary? That's very interesting. And how might we fix that? It's a really good question. I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that. Yeah, Lissa, go ahead. I see your hand waving.
From what I have gleaned from other people in the last several years, I think one thing is people feel like our government, from local all the way to the federal, have become very corrupt. And so that makes them very upset and they don't trust them. So a lot of people have suggested that they feel like it's time for term limits. That would create more of an incentive for them to work together than to work apart.
Yes, that's very interesting. Yeah, pros and cons to that. I guess the people who don't want term limits would say, well, it's great that we have people who get to actually build these relationships over time, who understand how the sort of structure works that makes them more effective. But to your point, if those relationships aren't getting built over time, then it starts to be a question of whether term limits is actually something that makes sense, because it reduces the incentives to always worry about reelections in perpetuity, instead to actually try to get something productive accomplished with people with whom you don't agree. So yes, really interesting. Okay. Does anybody have any final thoughts? This was a great conversation. We were going to talk about the issues shaping 2026, but I think we actually got into a really good conversation about civics more generally and sort of our civic fabric today, and the need for these sort of third spaces and what's missing in civics education. So that was really kind of cool to see that conversation sort of morph in that direction. So really pleased. So thank you all, as always, for sharing your thoughts. That's why we offer this space, for exactly that reason. So that there is a place where we can all get together and talk, and the kids call it a safe space. But thanks for being here. And like I said, oh, really quick, somebody in the chat, I'm reading We the People by Jill Lepore. Funny you should mention that. That's our book club book for our upcoming book club. So if that's Graham who said that, Graham, join our book club if you aren't already part of it. And if you haven't downloaded our app, I'm telling you, please do it. You're going to love it. It's lots of stuff like this. It's at your fingertips when you want it. And we've got all kinds of fun, exciting things like this planned. So, but anyway, thanks again. I hope everybody has a really great day, and see you next time.